It was April 8th, 1271. Sultan got down from his horse. He took out his pen, write a letter. This was no ordinary letter. The letter changed 200 years of history. In front of him stood the great castle of Krak des Chevaliers, the castle that the world called unbreakable, the castle that was the symbol of the crusaders' power. This was the home of the Knights Hospitaller, warriors who pulled out their swords just by hearing a Muslim's name. Inside this castle, there was food for months, water for years, and walls that looked like they could stand until judgment. Taking this castle is impossible, but this was no normal commander. This was Sultan Baybars, the same Baybars who had given the Mongols their first historic defeat. If Baybars lost this game today, a different chapter might have been written in the history of Islam. But this was the day a fake letter changed the course of history. The story begins where life was just a fight for survival. It was the middle of the 13th century. The Islamic world was surrounded on every side. From the east came the Mongols, those savages who had painted Baghdad with blood. From the west came the crusaders, those who spilled Muslim blood in the name of the cross. At such a time, in a big market in Cairo, a young Kipchak Turkish boy stood as a slave. He was tall, had green eyes, and signs of bravery showed on his face. His name was Rukn al-Din Baybars. That day, no one knew that this slave would become the sword of Islam in the future. Baybars joined the special group of Mamluks. These were slaves who were trained for war since childhood. In the morning, there would be Quran reading, followed by sword practice, in the afternoon archery practice, and in the evening learning war tactics. Baybars was excellent in all of this. When the famous Battle of Ain Jalut arrived in 1260, Baybars was no longer that young slave. He was now a commander. The Mongols were coming towards Egypt after Baghdad. If they succeeded, the last fortress of Islam would have fallen. On that day, Baybars showed his intelligence and ability. He split his forces into groups, used the hit-and-run tactic, trapped the Mongols in the valley of Ain Jalut, and then gave them such a defeat that the legend of the Mongols being unbeatable ended. Now let's come to the main story. What was Krak des Chevaliers? Why was this castle so important for both sides? Imagine, between Syria and Palestine, between Homs and Tripoli, on a 650-meter high hill, stands a castle that overlooks miles in every direction. This was not just a castle, it was the heart of the Crusaders. In 1142, the Knights Hospitaller got this castle and built it in a way that surprised the world's engineers. Two circle walls. If the first wall breaks, the second wall remains. Between the walls is a ditch where horses would drown. Inside the castle was space for 2,000 fighters, food for 5 years, and water tanks that never run out. The Crusaders said, if Muslims take all our castles in Syria, but Krak des Chevaliers is with us, we can still come back. This was their pride, the symbol of their power. Baybars, who became the Sultan of Egypt in 1260, knew everything about this castle. He knew that as long as this castle was in Crusader hands, the Islamic world would never see peace. But how? How to take this unbreakable castle? It was February 1271. Sultan Baybars was sitting in Cairo when news reached him. The King of France, Louis IX, who had come for the 8th Crusade, had died in Tunis. This was the best news for Baybars. Baybars told his commanders, the time has come. It is Krak des Chevaliers' turn. But his plan was not simple. First, he gathered forces from Homs, Hama, and the Ismaili sect of Jebel Ansariya. Then he called for special engineers from Aleppo, men who were experts in digging mines and breaking down castles. On March 3rd, when the morning sun rose, Baybars' army moved towards Krak des Chevaliers. Imagine, thousands of horsemen, hundreds of catapults, and caravans of camels that seemed to have no end. When the Knights Hospitaller saw this view from the castle towers, they understood that this time it was serious. This was not like previous times, just an attack for loot. This time, the situation was dangerous. First day of siege, Baybars ordered, set up the catapults. 3 huge catapults were brought. One was named Al-Mansuri, so big it could throw stones weighing 100 kilos. Another was named Al-Ghadban, the catapult of anger. The third was named Al-Mujahid. On March 18th, when the rain stopped, the real bombing began. Day and night, without stopping. The castle walls were hit, but they did not break. The Crusaders used their own catapults in return, but Baybars' catapults were much stronger. Baybars realized that bombing from above was not enough, so he called those miners from Aleppo, who were famous all over the world. In the dark of night, while the castle guards listened to the sounds of catapults, Baybars' engineers started their work under the towers. They dug tunnels underground. First, a tunnel starts far from the tower. Slowly it goes underground to the foundation of the tower. When they reach under the tower, they dig a large room. They fill this room with thick wooden pillars. The wood holds the weight of the tower. Then they leave the room and set fire to the wood. March 29th, it was evening prayer time. Suddenly, a strange sound came from underground. First slow, then fast. The crusaders realized things were going bad. They ran from the tower. In the dark of night, in the light of flames, the southwest tower suddenly shook. And then with a huge noise it collapsed. The whole hill shook. A large hole was made in the wall. Baibar's soldiers shouted, "Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!" They entered through the hole. Swords flashed in the air, iron hitting iron, a fight of life and death. When the outer wall fell, the knights who were still alive ran to the inner castle. This was their last hope. The inner castle was still strong, its walls thick, its towers high. Baybars brought his catapults into the outer courtyard. Now the distance was short, the aim was accurate. In the first days of April, the situation of the Knights Hospitaller became very bad. Bad news came to the castle commander. The King of France is dead. Europe is busy with its own internal wars. No one is coming. They were alone, surrounded, without hope. Baybars watched all this from the castle walls. He consulted with his minister. This castle cannot be taken by force. If we keep the siege for a few more months, our army will get tired. We need something else. The minister said, "Sultan, sometimes the pen is sharper than the sword." Baybars smiled. He knew what the minister was saying. On the night of April 3rd, Baybars ordered his most skilled scribes. A letter had to be written, a letter that no one would doubt. The scribes worked all night. The seal of the leader of the Knights Hospitaller in Tripoli was forged. The signature was copied. The type of paper, the type of ink, even the way it was folded, everything had to be perfect. The text of the letter was this: "My dear and loyal brothers, I, your leader, send this message from Tripoli. Our situation is bad. The King of France is dead. Europe has turned its face from us. I order you with my authority. Accept the conditions of peace with the Sultan. If you surrender, your lives will be safe. If not, you will all die. This is my order. Obey it." The letter was given to an Arab merchant who had just come from Tripoli. The merchant reached the castle gate. He said, "I have an important message from Tripoli." The castle commander read the letter, but after reading the letter, the commander became deep in thought. The seal was correct. The signature was familiar. He said to himself, "Is this possible? Are we really abandoned?" The commander consulted with his leaders. Some doubted, but the majority said, "If this is the leader's order, we must obey." April 8th, 1271. Early morning sun hit the walls of Krak des Chevaliers. After a hard siege of 36 days, the castle gates opened. The white flag of the Knights Hospitaller with the red cross slowly came down. In its place, the yellow flag of the Mamluks went up. The Crusader warriors walked out of the castle one by one. Their heads were down. The pride they had kept for 200 years was broken today. Baybars stood in front of them. He told them, "You are under my protection. No one will harm you. You can go to Tripoli in peace." When the last knight left the castle, Baybars went to the castle gate. He placed an inscription in Arabic, "In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful." This is God's grace that he gives to whom he wills. This castle was conquered with God's help and by the hands of Muslims. Baybars entered the inner castle. He turned the church into a mosque. He built a prayer niche. The sound of the adhan, call to prayer, was heard in the air of this castle for the first time. The fall of Krak des Chevaliers was not just the conquest of a castle. It was the beginning of the fall of Crusader power. In the next 20 years, all their other castles fell one by one. With the fall of Acre in 1291, the 200-year Crusader era came to an end. Baybars achieved with a pen what months of bombing could not do. Today, if you travel to the west of Syria, you will see Krak des Chevaliers standing. Tourists come, take selfies, and hear history from a guide. But many do not know what a great lesson of cleverness and bravery is hidden in these walls. If you look closely, near the southwest tower, you will see Baybars' inscription. Now the writing is very faint, but it can still be read. It is a witness to the day when a sultan took a castle with the power of a pen that he could not take with the power of a sword.